It was supposed to be a thoughtful conversation between two powerful voices in American politics. Instead, it became one of the most unexpected confrontations ever seen on primetime news. The night Jasmine Crockett appeared on the Rachel Maddow show, the studio was quiet. Not tense, not hostile, just quiet. A silence that comes when something important is about to happen, even if no one knows it yet. Jasmine had been invited to speak about a recent vote that had split the House. A vote she'd taken not for convenience, not for optics, but for conscience. She knew she would be asked tough questions. She had prepared for that. What she had not prepared for was the way the tone of the interview would shift, from respectful challenge to personal attack. As the segment began, Rachel greeted her guest with familiar warmth. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett joins us tonight. Thank you for being here. Jasmine returned the smile. Thanks for having me, Rachel. I appreciate the platform. The first few minutes were exactly as expected. Rachel asked about the legislative details. Jasmine answered thoroughly. She referenced policy, precedent, and her constituents' concerns. The exchange was civil, intelligent, and grounded. But then Rachel changed lanes, not with anger, but with edge. Congresswoman, she said, eyes narrowing slightly. Many of your critics, even some allies, have pointed to your visible religious symbols and questioned whether they belong in a space meant to represent all Americans. How do you respond to that? Jasmine didn't flinch. I carry my faith with me. I don't weaponize it. I don't legislate from it. I don't ask anyone else to follow it. I just don't hide it. Rachel nodded slowly. But isn't that the problem? That you're making it visible at all? In a time when people feel more excluded than ever, even symbols can become signals. Do you really believe wearing a cross doesn't come with political weight? Jasmine looked directly at her. My cross isn't a signal. It's not a billboard. It's not a campaign. It's my grandmother's. She gave it to me when I passed the bar. I wear it because it reminds me that I didn't get here by accident. I got here by grace. The studio stayed silent. Rachel leaned in. But does wearing it on national television, on a political news program, suggest that your decisions are guided by religion? My decisions are guided by principle, Jasmine answered. Faith happens to be one of them. So is justice. So is fairness. So is restraint. If I wore a rainbow pin, or a peace sign, or a flag, no one would question it. But a cross? That becomes controversial. Rachel smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You do see how that reads to some viewers though, right? Particularly the ones who feel that religion has been used against them politically? Jasmine nodded. I understand their pain, but I'm not their enemy. And I won't apologize for surviving this system with my identity intact. The air grew dense. Not angry. Not loud. Just dense. Rachel shifted in her chair. I have to say, Congresswoman, you've come here talking about inclusion, but some of what you've said feels more like defiance. Jasmine didn't look away. It's not defiance to exist. For a few seconds, neither woman spoke. The audience didn't cough. The crew didn't move. It was the kind of silence that tells you something true just landed, and it hit harder than either of them planned. Rachel glanced off camera. The producers were now speaking into headsets, rapidly gesturing. One reached for a control board. Something in the segment had clearly triggered concern behind the scenes. And then Rachel's tone shifted again. Well, I think that's a convenient answer, she said. But this isn't church. This is national news. People come here for facts, not faith. Jasmine leaned forward, her voice still soft. Facts and faith aren't enemies. And neither should we be. The lights didn't flicker. The cameras didn't cut. But something else broke in that moment. Whatever mutual understanding had brought Jasmine onto the show, whatever shared respect had once existed between guest and host, it was gone. Whatever mutual understanding had brought Jasmine onto the show, whatever shared respect had once existed between guest and host, it was gone. The segment cut to commercial without warning. A brief musical sting filled the air, but the tension did not lift. Off camera, Rachel stood up first. She walked toward the producer's desk without looking back. Jasmine remained seated, her hands folded neatly in her lap. A stage assistant approached quietly and leaned in. We're being told to cut your segment short, he said. We won't be coming back to you after the break. Jasmine turned to face him fully. No explanation. The assistant hesitated. Just that. The rest of the show's being restructured. They're moving up the panel discussion. Jasmine nodded once. She didn't argue. She didn't demand clarification. She simply sat in silence for a few more seconds before removing her microphone and placing it gently on the table. She stood up and smoothed her jacket. The cross still hung at her neck, untouched, unmoved. As she walked off the stage, a producer intercepted her near the hallway. "We didn't expect that segment to go where it did," the producer said, her voice low but clipped. The audience felt uncomfortable. Jasmine looked her in the eye. "I didn't expect the discomfort to be with me for answering questions I didn't ask to be asked." The producer opened her mouth to respond, but stopped. Backstage, Jasmine returned to her dressing room without assistance. She passed crew members who offered her sidelong glances, not out of hostility, but something closer to quiet sympathy. People who understood what had just happened, but knew better than to say it out loud. In the control room, the edit team had already begun scrubbing the segment, cutting it down to fit a safer narrative. A senior producer made the call to omit the faith exchange entirely from the rebroadcast. By the time Jasmine emerged from the dressing room 15 minutes later, her car was already waiting. Her phone buzzed with text messages from colleagues, reporters, and friends who had watched the show live and were trying to make sense of what they had just seen. But Jasmine didn't need time to process it. She had seen it before, not always this publicly, but always this clearly. When respect becomes conditional. When a guest is welcome until they stop fitting the script. When the rules of civility only apply in one direction. Outside the building, a junior reporter from a local blog waited near the curb. "Congresswoman Crockett," she called out. "Do you have a comment on what just happened?" Jasmine paused. She didn't speak for effect. She spoke because someone had finally asked with honesty. "I was invited to speak about policy," she said. "Instead, I was asked to justify my humanity." The reporter lowered her phone slightly. "And the cross?" she asked. Jasmine looked at her gently. "I didn't wear it to make a point, but the reaction to it made the point for me." That clip would later go viral, far outpacing the edited segment that eventually aired on Rachel Maddow's show. In the version the network broadcast, Jasmine's appearance was reduced to a polite exchange about infrastructure and a muted "thank you" before cutting to the next guest. But for those who had seen it live, the memory was different. The moment when a sitting congresswoman was asked to defend a personal symbol of faith. The moment she refused to be shamed for carrying the past that had shaped her. And the moment she was dismissed not with outrage, but with quiet precision. Back at the studio, Rachel returned to air as if nothing had happened. The panel discussed election maps. A musical guest played a closing set. Laughter returned to the room, but it felt thinner somehow. Like everyone was trying to pretend the interruption hadn't changed anything. It had. Not because of the cross. Not because of Jasmine's answers. But because the audience had seen something they weren't supposed to notice. The moment when a space that claimed to be inclusive drew its line. The days that followed were strangely quiet. Not because the moment had gone unnoticed, but because no one seemed sure how to talk about it. News outlets that typically rushed to cover even the smallest missteps on air remained cautious. Some ran brief, factual reports. Others stayed silent altogether. But on social media, the conversation was already burning. Clips of Jasmine's appearance, both the official edit and the uncut live streams, began circulating within hours. The part that aired showed only a fraction of the exchange. Gone was the line about survival. Gone was the moment of stillness. Gone was the quiet dismantling of the idea that faith must always be hidden to be valid. But the truth had already found its way out. And people were listening. Not everyone agreed with Jasmine. Some said she should have known what kind of show she was walking into. Others accused her of bringing religion into politics. But even those who disagreed found themselves hesitating when they watched the full footage. Because Jasmine had not shouted. She had not accused. She had not derailed the conversation. She had simply responded, with clarity, calm, and complete presence. What followed wasn't outrage. It wasn't cancellation. It was something quieter and more enduring. Recognition. A shift in how people talked about belonging. It wasn't just about a cross. It wasn't just about one guest on one show. It was about the conditions people were expected to meet in order to be seen as credible. It was about what made a person's identity acceptable on camera and what made it inconvenient. And it was about how easy it was to applaud diversity while quietly policing its edges. In a podcast interview 2 weeks later, a former producer from the show spoke anonymously. "We always say we want different voices," she said. "But when someone actually brings difference, not performance, but real difference, the room tightens. It's like there's this invisible script that everyone's supposed to stick to, even when we claim to be breaking it." She paused, and Jasmine didn't stick to it. Back in Washington, Jasmine returned to work without ceremony. She didn't release a statement. She didn't demand airtime to respond. She simply showed up, did the job she had always done, and let others decide what the moment meant. But inside her office, the letters began to arrive. Not just emails or tweets, real letters. Some came from young women who saw themselves in her. Others came from older voters who didn't share her politics but respected her composure. A few came from parents who wrote simply to say thank you, because their children had watched and asked questions they'd never asked before. Jasmine read every single one. One came from a retired minister in Alabama. "I never thought I'd see the day when wearing a cross would get someone kicked off the news," he wrote. "But I'm glad you didn't take it off." She kept that one in her desk drawer. Meanwhile, the network did not apologize. Rachel Maddow did not address the incident. The show continued as if nothing had changed. But viewers noticed. Comments shifted. Ratings dipped slightly. The silence around the moment became its own kind of statement. Eventually, the public conversation moved on. Another headline, another guest, another controversy. But the impact of what had happened didn't fade. Because what Jasmine had done, calmly, without performance, was named something unspoken. That acceptance, in certain spaces, still came with conditions. That being invited did not mean being welcomed. And that respect, when it disappears the moment someone brings their full self into the room, was never respect to begin with. She had not stormed off. She had not fought back with fury. She had simply refused to be made smaller. And in doing so, she showed what dignity looks like when the cameras are still rolling and the room starts to turn. If you believe these moments matter, if you believe that being different should never mean being dismissed, then share this story. Because what happened on that stage wasn't just about one woman or one show. It was about all the spaces where people are told to show up, only to be told to shrink. Let us know in the comments. When respect is conditional, is it really respect at all? And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.